Ryan Hale's hand trembled as he pulled the last $18 from his wallet, every cent he had left in the world, and pressed it into the cold, shaking fingers of a stranger at a freezing bus stop. His 7-year-old daughter needed boots. His rent was 3 weeks late. His refrigerator was empty. And still, he gave it all away. What he didn't know was that the woman wrapped in that ragged coat wasn't homeless at all. She was watching him, studying him. And by sunrise the next morning, a black limousine would pull up outside his rundown apartment, and the woman inside would change his life forever. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe kindness still matters in this world, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because what happens next will stay with you for a long, long time. The alarm clock on the cracked nightstand rang at 4:17 in the morning, and Ryan Hale was already awake. He'd been awake for nearly an hour, lying flat on his back in the dark, staring at the water stain on the ceiling of the one-bedroom apartment he shared with his daughter. The stain had grown again. It looked like a country he didn't recognize anymore, spreading slowly across the plaster, just like the worry spreading slowly across his chest. He reached over and shut off the alarm before it could wake Emma in the next room. 41 years old, United States Navy, 22 years of service, 2 deployments, a chest full of ribbons folded neatly in a drawer somewhere. And here he was in a third-floor walk-up in a part of Norfolk, Virginia, where the streetlights flickered and the elevator hadn't worked since the spring. He sat up slowly, planted his bare feet on the cold linoleum, and rubbed both hands down his face. "Come on, sailor," he whispered to himself. "Get up. She needs you." Ryan Hale had been a chief petty officer for 9 years. He'd commanded men. He'd been shot at. He'd carried a wounded brother on his back through the dark for 1.5 miles once, and he hadn't complained then either. But that morning in the silence of his apartment with $18 to his name and a daughter sleeping in the next room who had outgrown her shoes 3 weeks ago, he felt something he hadn't felt in all those years overseas. He felt afraid. Not the kind of fear that comes when bullets whistle past your ear. That kind of fear is quick and clean and over. This fear was different. It was slow. It crawled up the spine like a cold finger. It sat down on the chest and made itself comfortable. It was the fear of a father who didn't know how he was going to feed his child. He stood up, pulled on his uniform pants, and padded into the small kitchen. The faucet hissed when he turned it on. He filled the coffee pot with tap water and measured out the last 2 scoops from the can, scraping the bottom for grounds. He'd have to switch to tea bags by Thursday. The cheap kind from the dollar store, 2 for $1. While the coffee brewed, he opened the refrigerator. 1/2 gallon of milk, 3 slices of bread, a jar of grape jelly with maybe 2 tablespoons left, a single egg sitting in the door tray like the last soldier in a defeated army. He shut the door quietly. "Daddy." He turned around. Emma was standing in the kitchen doorway in her pink pajamas, her hair sticking up in every direction, the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2 clutched under one arm. Ryan smiled. Whatever else he had to be in this moment, in this kitchen in front of this little girl, he had to be steady. "Hey, sunshine, what are you doing up so early?" "I had a bad dream." He bent down and scooped her up, settling her on his hip the way he had 1,000 times. She was getting heavier. He didn't say it out loud, but he noticed every time. Heavier and taller and older. 7 years old now. 7 years since the day her mother walked out the hospital doors and never came back. What was the dream about, baby? She buried her face in his neck. "You went away again. On the boat. And you didn't come back." He closed his eyes. Hey, look at me." He pulled back gently and tilted her chin up. "I'm not going anywhere. You hear me? Daddy is right here. I am right here, and I'm not leaving you. Not ever. You promise?" "I promise." She studied him with those wide brown eyes that were so much like her mother's, it sometimes hurt to look at her. "Pinky promise." He held out his little finger. She hooked hers around it and squeezed. "Now," he said, setting her down on the kitchen chair. "How about some breakfast? Can we have pancakes?" He swallowed hard. "Not today, sweetheart. We're out of pancake mix. How about some toast with jelly? I'll make it just the way you like." With the crusts cut off. With the crusts cut off. She nodded and kicked her feet under the chair. Ryan turned back to the counter so she wouldn't see his face. He pulled out 2 slices of bread, leaving one for her lunch, and dropped them in the toaster. The kitchen was silent, except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the slow drip of the leaky faucet he kept meaning to fix. While the toast browned, Ryan opened his wallet and looked inside again, hoping somehow there would be more than what he remembered. There wasn't. A 10, a 5, 3 crumpled ones, $18. That was it. That was everything he had until payday on Friday. And payday on Friday was already spoken for. The electric bill was $62 overdue. The rent was $850, and his next paycheck after taxes would be just over $1,200. After rent and electric, he'd have roughly $288 left to feed his daughter, fill his gas tank, buy gas to get to the base, and somehow find a way to put new shoes on her growing feet. The toast popped up. He spread the last of the jelly on it, careful to scrape every corner of the jar. He cut the crusts off with the dull knife from the drawer and set the plate down in front of her with a glass of milk. Eat up, sunshine. We've got to get moving. Where are you going today? Daddy's got drill at the base this morning, and then I'm picking up a shift at the warehouse tonight. She frowned. Another night shift? Just for a little while, baby. Just till things get better. When are things going to get better? He paused. He looked at her sitting there with jelly on the corner of her mouth, swinging her bare feet in the air, and he felt his heart break into pieces so small he didn't think he'd ever be able to put them back together. Soon, he said. Soon, sweetheart. Daddy's working on it. He turned away and pretended to be busy at the sink. By the time Mrs. Petrov arrived to take Emma to school, Ryan had his uniform pressed, his boots polished, and a smile fixed firmly on his face. Mrs. Petrov was a heavy-set Ukrainian widow from down the hall who watched Emma in the mornings and afternoons for $40 a week. It was the cheapest childcare in the building. She loved Emma like her own grandchild, and Ryan suspected she sometimes fed her dinner without saying anything when she could tell he was short on groceries. "Good morning, Ryan," she said in her thick accent, hanging her coat on the hook by the door. "Cold today. Very cold. You wear hat?" "Yes, ma'am." "And gloves?" "Yes, ma'am." She wagged a finger at him. "You take care of yourself, soldier man. Little one needs her papa." "I know, Mrs. Petrov." "Thank you." Emma ran to him and threw her arms around his waist. He bent down and kissed the top of her head, breathing in the smell of her hair. "Have a good day at school, sunshine. Don't be late picking me up tonight, Daddy." "I won't, I promise." He watched her go, watched her wave from the doorway one last time, and then he closed the door. For a long moment he stood there in the silent apartment, his back against the door, his eyes closed. Then he straightened up, squared his shoulders, and went to face the day. The drive to Naval Station Norfolk took 20 minutes in good traffic. Ryan made it in 25, and he pulled into the parking lot just before 6 o'clock. The morning was bitterly cold. A hard wind came in off the Chesapeake Bay, cutting through his coat and making his eyes water. He pulled his cap down low and walked across the lot toward the administrative building. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, and the coffee in the break room smelled burnt. He was halfway to his desk when his commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Brennan, stuck his head out of his office. "Hale, a word." Ryan stopped. Something in Brennan's voice was off. "Yes, sir." He stepped into the office. Brennan closed the door behind him. "Sit down, Chief." Ryan sat. Brennan was a good officer. Tough, but fair. He'd known Ryan for 6 years, had served with him in the Gulf, had been at Emma's mother's funeral. He sat down behind his desk and folded his hands in front of him, and Ryan knew before he even spoke that whatever was coming was going to be bad. "There's no easy way to say this, Chief." "Sir." Brennan took a long breath. "The cuts came down from the top last night. Department of Defense restructuring. They're reducing personnel across multiple support divisions effective end of next month. Your name is on the list." Ryan felt the air leave his lungs. He sat very still. "Sir, I fought it, Chief. I want you to know that. I went up the chain 3 times. They wouldn't budge. It's not about your performance. Your record is exemplary. It's about budget. It's about numbers on a spreadsheet. You're a chief petty officer at the top of your pay grade, and they can replace you with 2 junior enlisted for less money. The room was very quiet. How long do I have, sir? 6 weeks. Full benefits through the transition. Then a small severance. I'm sorry, Chief. I am truly deeply sorry. Ryan nodded slowly. He didn't trust himself to speak. You'll be eligible for veterans' benefits, of course. And there are programs to help with the transition to civilian work. I'll write you a recommendation that'll knock the doors off any employer in this state. I promise you that. Thank you, sir. Chief. Ryan stood up. Permission to be excused, sir. Brennan looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Granted. Ryan walked out of the office down the hall past his desk, past the break room with its burnt coffee, and out the door into the cold morning. He walked across the parking lot to his truck. He got inside. He shut the door. And then, for the first time since his wife's funeral 7 years ago, Chief Petty Officer Ryan Hale put his face in his hands and wept. He cried for 10 minutes, maybe 15. He didn't know. Long, ragged sobs that came up from somewhere deep inside him, somewhere he hadn't visited in a long time. He cried for his daughter, who deserved better than what he could give her. He cried for his wife, who had died too young. He cried for himself, for the man he had been, for the man he had wanted to be, for the failure he felt he had become. And then, when there were no tears left, he wiped his face with the back of his hand, started the engine, and drove away from the base. He couldn't go home. Not yet. He couldn't sit in that empty apartment and stare at the water stain on the ceiling and think about what he was going to tell his daughter. He drove instead to a small park near the harbor, where he sometimes took Emma on Saturdays. He parked the truck and walked down to the water. The sky was iron gray. Gulls wheeled and cried overhead. A container ship moved slowly along the horizon, riding low in the water, heading out to sea. Ryan stood at the railing and watched it go. What was he going to do? He did the math in his head. After the last paycheck, he'd have maybe $1,000 in savings. The severance might be another $2,000 or $3,000. That would carry them barely through 2 months, maybe 3 if he was careful. After that, what unemployment food stamps a shelter? He clenched his jaw. No, not his daughter, not Emma. He'd sleep in the truck before he let her sleep in a shelter. He turned to walk back to his vehicle. That was when he saw her. She was sitting on a bench at a bus stop across the street from the park. An old woman or so, she appeared. Hunched over. Wrapped in a long dark coat that had seen better days. A wool scarf pulled up over the lower half of her face. A canvas bag at her feet. She was alone in the cold, and she was shivering. Ryan could see her shoulders shaking from 50 yards away. He stopped. He didn't have time for this. He didn't have money for this. He didn't even have the emotional strength for this. But something in him, the same, something his father had drilled into him 40 years ago in a small farming town in Tennessee. The same something that had made him pull a wounded brother out of harm's way in a foreign desert. The same something that was the reason he could still look his daughter in the eye every night. That same something turned his feet toward her without asking his permission. He crossed the street. "Ma'am?" The woman lifted her head. Her face, what he could see of it above the scarf, was pale. Her eyes were a startling shade of green, sharp and intelligent, and they fixed on him with a wariness he didn't immediately understand. "Are you all right, ma'am? Do you need help?" She didn't answer right away. She seemed to be studying him. "I'm waiting for the bus," she said finally. Her voice was lower than he had expected, calmer. "It hasn't come." "How long have you been out here?" "Some time." Ryan glanced at the bus stop sign. "Ma'am, that route doesn't run until 8:30 on weekdays. You've got more than an hour to wait." She said nothing. He stood there for a moment, uncertain. Then he sat down on the bench beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "You're freezing, ma'am. Have you eaten anything today?" "I'm fine." "With respect, ma'am, you don't look fine. Is there someone I can call for you?" "No." He nodded slowly. He understood pride. He had a great deal of it himself. "There's a diner about 2 blocks from here," he said. "Joe's place. He opens at 6. Coffee's $1.25 and the hash browns are the best in the city. Why don't you let me walk you over there? You can warm up. Wait for the bus inside. She looked at him for a long moment. Why would you do that? He almost laughed. Ma'am, I don't know how to answer that question. It's just what you do. She didn't move. Ryan reached into his back pocket. He pulled out his wallet. He looked at it for a moment. $18. That was everything. That was breakfast for Emma for the next 3 days. That was the gas to get to the base for the next 2 days. That was the difference between making it to Friday and not making it to Friday. He thought about the look on Emma's face when she'd asked when things were going to get better. He thought about what kind of man he wanted her to grow up believing her father was. He pulled the $18 out of his wallet. The 10, the 5, the 3 crumpled ones, and he held them out to the woman on the bench. Ma'am, please take this. She stared at the money. Then she stared at him. What is this? It's $18. It's not much. It'll buy you a hot breakfast and a cab home if the bus doesn't come. It's all I've got, ma'am, but I'd like you to have it. For a long moment, she didn't move. Her green eyes searched his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, like she was looking for something specific, looking for a lie, looking for a trick. You don't know me, she said quietly. No, ma'am, I don't. You don't know what I would do with this money. No, ma'am, I don't know that either. Then why? Ryan thought about it for a moment. He looked out across the gray water. He thought about his daughter. He thought about his wife. He thought about the man who had just told him he was being let go after 22 years of service. Because, ma'am, he said slowly, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I don't know if I'm going to have a job in 6 weeks. I don't know how I'm going to feed my little girl. I don't know any of those things. But I know what's right in front of me right now. And right in front of me right now is a person who is cold, and I have $18 in my pocket. And if I keep that $18 and walk away from you, then I'm not the kind of man I want my daughter to think I am. He pressed the bills gently into her gloved hand. Please, ma'am, take it. Her fingers closed around the money slowly. He felt her hand trembling. He didn't know if it was from the cold or from something else. She didn't look up. She kept her eyes on the bills in her hand. What's your name? She asked. Her voice was different now, softer, almost shaking. Ryan, ma'am, Ryan Hale. Ryan Hale, she repeated as if she were committing it to memory. He stood up. You take care of yourself, ma'am. The diner's 2 blocks that way. Tell Joe that Ryan sent you. He'll look after you. He turned to walk away. Ryan. He stopped. He turned back. She had lifted her head, and now her eyes were shining with something he didn't understand. Not gratitude. Something deeper. Something almost like pain. Why is a man with your kind of strength worried about feeding his daughter? He smiled a small, sad smile. Because life doesn't always work out the way you plan, ma'am. And with that, he walked back across the street, got into his truck, and drove home to the empty apartment with the water stain on the ceiling, and the empty refrigerator, and the daughter who deserved a better father than the one she had. He didn't know it yet, but on a quiet street 20 miles away in the back seat of a black town car that had pulled up around the corner the moment he drove off, a woman in a long dark coat was pulling off her wool scarf and pressing 18 crumpled dollars to her chest, and for the first time in 9 years, Celeste Ardan was crying. The black town car moved through the morning traffic in silence. In the back seat, Celeste Ardan sat very still, the 18 crumpled dollars pressed against her chest like something sacred. Her driver, a man named Harlan, who had been with her family for 19 years, glanced at her in the rearview mirror, but said nothing. He had learned a long time ago when to speak and when to keep his peace. After several minutes, she lowered the money and placed it carefully on the leather seat beside her, smoothing each bill flat with her gloved fingers. The 10, the 5, the 3 crumpled ones. Harlan. Yes, ma'am. Pull over. Ma'am? Pull over, anywhere. Just pull over. He eased the car to the curb on a quiet side street. Celeste pressed her hand against her mouth and turned her face toward the window, and for nearly a minute she did not move. When she finally spoke, her voice was thin. I have made a mistake, Harlan. Ma'am. For 9 years I have been making a mistake. I have looked at the world and I have decided what kind of place it was. I made up my mind that I knew. And I was wrong. Harlan turned in his seat and looked back at her. He was a tall man in his late 60s, gray at the temples, with kind eyes that had seen a great deal. Ma'am, are you all right? No, Harlan. I am not all right. But for the first time in a long time, I think I might be on my way to being all right. She picked up the $18 again and held them in her lap. His name is Ryan Hale. He is in the Navy. I want to know everything about him. Everything, Harlan. Where he lives, whether he is married, whether he has children, where he serves, what his record looks like, what his commanding officer thinks of him, what he eats for breakfast. I want to know all of it, and I want to know it by tonight. Yes, ma'am. May I ask why? She looked down at the money in her lap. Because that man, she said quietly, just gave me everything he had in the world, and he doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know what I'm worth. He looked at an old woman shivering on a bench, and he gave her his last $18, and then he walked away without asking for so much as a thank you. She lifted her head. Do you know what the last person did? Harlan? The last person I trusted. The last person I gave my heart to. Yes, ma'am. I do. He took everything I had, and he left me with nothing but a signature and a smile and a courthouse on a Tuesday morning. And I told myself, after that I told myself that men like Ryan Hale did not exist, that they were a story women told themselves to feel better about a world that didn't care. Her voice broke. And then a man I have never met in my life sat down on a bench and gave me his last dollar and asked nothing in return. Nothing, Harlan. He didn't even ask my name. She closed her eyes. Drive me home. I have work to do. The estate sat on 12 acres outside the city behind iron gates and a long winding drive lined with old oaks. Celeste had bought it after the divorce with money she had clawed back from her ex-husband through 3 years of court battles. It was beautiful and quiet and entirely too large for one woman. She walked through the front door, handed her coat to the housekeeper without a word, and went straight to her study. By noon, she had a file on her desk. Harlan stood in the doorway with his hands folded in front of him. Everything I could find on short notice, ma'am. Marcus from security pulled the rest. There will be more by tomorrow morning. She opened the folder. Ryan Daniel Hale, born March 14, 1985 in Maryville, Tennessee. Father deceased lung cancer 2009. Mother deceased complications from diabetes 2014. Enlisted in the United States Navy at age 19. 22 years of service. 2 combat deployments. Bronze Star with Valor. Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal. 3 Good Conduct Medals. Promoted to Chief Petty Officer in 2016. Married Sarah Ann Whitfield. June 2017. 1 child. Emma Grace Hale. Born February 2018. Wife deceased complications from childbirth. February 2018. Father has been raising the child alone for 7 years. Current rank Chief Petty Officer. Current station Naval Station Norfolk. Status notice of separation issued this morning. Reduction in force. Effective end of next month. Celeste read the last line twice, then a third time. She set the folder down very gently on her desk. Harlan. Yes, ma'am. He was let go this morning. Yes, ma'am. About 40 minutes before he met you at that bus stop according to the timestamp on the personnel notice. She placed her hand flat on the folder. He gave me his last $18 an hour after he found out he was losing his job. Yes, ma'am. He has a 7-year-old daughter. Yes, ma'am. He has been raising her alone since the day she was born. Yes, ma'am. Celeste was very still for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone on her desk. Get me Daniel Marsh in legal. Tell him to clear his afternoon. And tell Iris to come up here. I want her in front of me in 15 minutes. She set the phone down and looked at Harlan. Tomorrow morning, you will drive me to an address in Norfolk. 8 o'clock sharp. Bring the Lincoln, not the limousine. I don't want to scare him. Ma'am, if I may, what are you planning to do? She turned and looked out the tall window behind her desk. The afternoon light was thin and pale on the lawn. "I am going to do what someone should have done for him a long time ago, Harlan. I am going to give that man back his life." That same evening, 20 miles away, Ryan was sitting on the floor of his apartment, sorting through a cardboard box of old paperwork. He had not told Mrs. Petrov about the layoff. He had not told Emma. He had not told anyone. He had picked his daughter up from school at the usual time, taken her home, made her dinner from a box of macaroni and cheese he found in the back of the cupboard, helped her with her spelling words, and put her to bed at 8:30. Now he was sitting on the living room floor with the box in front of him, going through every receipt and tax document and benefits statement. He had trying to figure out exactly how long he could keep his daughter housed and fed before everything fell apart. The math wasn't good. He heard her bedroom door open behind him. "Daddy?" He pushed the box behind the couch quickly and turned around. "Hey, sunshine, you're supposed to be asleep." "I can't sleep." She padded across the carpet in her pink pajamas and climbed into his lap. He wrapped his arms around her. "What's the matter, baby? I'm worried about you." He closed his eyes. "Why are you worried about me, Em?" "Because you were sad at dinner. You tried to hide it, but I saw." He kissed the top of her head. "Daddy had a hard day at work today, that's all." "What happened?" "Just grown-up stuff, sweetheart." She was quiet for a moment. "Daddy, are we poor?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He held her tighter. "Why would you ask that, Emma?" "Because Megan at school said her mom said you couldn't pay for the field trip last month. And she said her mom said it was because we don't have any money. And I told her that wasn't true because you said we were going to be okay. But she said her mom said we weren't." Ryan felt the tears coming, and he forced them back down. "Listen to me, Emma Grace. Look at me." She lifted her face. "I don't want you ever to worry about money. That is not your job. Worrying about money is a grown-up's job, and Daddy is the grown-up in this house, and I am taking care of it. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Daddy. And I want you to know something else. Money doesn't make a family. Money doesn't make you safe. Money doesn't make you loved. You know what makes you safe." "What?" "Me. I make you safe, and I'm not going anywhere. Not ever. You hear me, sunshine?" "I hear you, Daddy. Now you go on back to bed. You have school in the morning." She slid off his lap, then turned and threw her arms around his neck and squeezed as hard as her small arms could squeeze. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you more, baby." He watched her walk back to her bedroom and close the door. Then he sat alone on the carpet in the dim light of a single lamp and stared at nothing for a very long time. Eventually he got up and went into the kitchen. He opened the cupboard above the stove. There was a coffee can on the top shelf in the back behind the spices he never used. He took it down and pried off the plastic lid. Inside were 3 $20 bills folded into a tight square. $60. The emergency fund he had been hiding from himself for 2 years, the money he had promised himself he would not touch unless Emma was hurt or sick or there was nothing left. He looked at it. Then he put the lid back on, returned the can to its hiding spot, and shut the cupboard. Not yet. Not yet. He went to bed at 11 and lay awake until almost 3. The knock on his door came at 8:14 in the morning. He had just put Emma on the school bus and was sitting at the kitchen table in his uniform, drinking the last cup of coffee from yesterday's pot, trying to work up the energy to drive to a base where he no longer felt welcome. The knock startled him. He set the cup down and crossed to the door. He looked through the peephole. A woman stood on the other side. Tall, maybe 50. Long dark coat. Auburn hair pulled back. She was alone, but he could see a black car parked at the curb behind her and a man in a dark suit standing beside it with his hands folded. He didn't recognize her. He didn't recognize the car. He didn't recognize anything about this. He opened the door a few inches, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you?" The woman lifted her chin and met his eyes. "Mr. Hale." It was not a question. He frowned. "Yes, do I know you, ma'am?" "You met me yesterday morning, Mr. Hale, at a bus stop near the harbor." He stared at her. For a long moment he could not place her at all. The auburn hair, the good coat. the way she held herself straight as a flagpole. There was nothing about this woman that resembled the bent old figure he had sat down beside on that bench. And then he saw her eyes, that sharp, startling green. He took a step back. May I come in, Mr. Hale? I'd like to speak with you for a few minutes." He didn't move. He just stood there holding the door, his mind racing. "Ma'am, what is going on?" "I'll explain everything if you'll let me in. You have my word. No harm will come to you. The man at the car is my driver. He'll wait outside." Ryan hesitated. He looked past her at the man by the car. He looked back at her. He undid the chain. "Come in, ma'am." She stepped inside, and he closed the door behind her. She glanced briefly around the small apartment. The threadbare couch, the water stain on the ceiling, the single lamp in the corner. She gave no reaction at all, but he felt her take it all in, and his face burned with a shame he couldn't put into words. "Can I take your coat?" "Thank you, no. I won't be long." He gestured to the couch. "Please." She sat down. He took the chair across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You must have a great many questions, Mr. Hale." "Yes, ma'am, I do." "Then let me try to answer them in order. My name is Celeste Ardon. I am the Chief Executive Officer of a company called Ardon Logistics headquartered in this city. We employ approximately 1,200 people across 6 states. I sit on the boards of 3 other companies. My personal net worth is at last count approximately $1.7 billion. Ryan stared at her. She continued without any change in tone. "Yesterday morning I was at that bus stop in disguise. I do that from time to time. I sit at bus stops and coffee shops in line at the grocery store. I observe the people who live in this city, many of whom work for me, and I try to understand what their lives are actually like. I do this because I run a very large company, and the people who give me reports are paid to tell me what I want to hear, and I have learned that the only way to know what is really happening is to go and see for myself." She paused. "And yesterday what I saw was a man who had every reason in the world to walk past me, and who instead sat down beside me and gave me everything he had in his pocket and asked for nothing in return." Ryan looked down at his hands. "Ma'am, I didn't know who you were." "I am aware of that, Mr. Hale. That is precisely why I am here this morning." He looked up. "I have spent the last 24 hours learning everything there is to know about you. I know you were born in Tennessee. I know your father died when you were 24, and your mother when you were 29. I know you enlisted in the Navy at 19. I know you have a Bronze Star. I know you have been a Chief Petty Officer for 9 years. I know your wife Sarah died 7 years ago, giving birth to your daughter Emma." Ryan stiffened. "Ma'am, I know you have been raising her alone ever since. I know you work 2 jobs, and that the second one is at a warehouse on the west side of town that pays you $11.25 an hour for shifts that begin at 7 in the evening and end at 1 in the morning." He stood up. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't know how you got that information, and I don't appreciate. Please sit down, Mr. Hale." There was something in her voice that stopped him. Not command. Something quieter. Something almost like grief. He sat. "I also know," she said slowly, "that yesterday morning, approximately 40 minutes before you sat down beside me on that bench, you were informed by your commanding officer that you would be losing your position with the Navy at the end of next month, a reduction in force." He could not speak. "You gave me your last $18, she said, "after you had just been told you were losing your job. You did not know me. You did not owe me anything. You had a child to feed and a rent to pay and nothing in your pocket but those $18, and you gave them to me anyway." Her voice grew very quiet. "Why, Mr. Hale?" He stared at her. "Why?" she asked again. "I have been asking myself that question all night. I need to hear you say it. Why did you do it?" He swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I don't have a fancy answer for you. I'm not looking for a fancy answer." He thought for a long moment. "My father," he said finally, "was a tobacco farmer in Tennessee. He didn't have much. He never had much his whole life. But he used to tell me that a man is not measured by what he has in his pocket. A man is measured by what he does when his pocket is empty. He used to say that any fool can be generous when he's rich, The test of a man is whether he can be generous when he's broke. He looked down. I've been broke a lot in my life, ma'am. I've been broke since I was a kid. But I have a little girl asleep in that room over there, and one day she is going to be a grown woman, and she is going to have to decide what kind of person she wants to be in this world. And I figure the only way I have any hope of teaching her to be good is to be good myself, even when nobody is watching, especially when nobody is watching. He lifted his eyes to hers. You looked cold, ma'am. That's the whole reason. You looked cold, and I had $18, and that was all there was to it. Celeste Ardon, the woman who had built a logistics empire from a single warehouse, who had sat across the table from senators and heads of state, who had not cried in the presence of another human being in 9 full years, lowered her head. For a long time, the only sound in the apartment was the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse. Mr. Hale? Yes, ma'am. My ex-husband took everything from me 9 years ago. He took the company my father built. He took the company my father built. He took the money my mother left me. He took my house. He took my reputation. He took every shred of trust I ever had in another human being, and he wrapped it up in a package, and he handed it to a divorce attorney, and he walked out of my life, and he left me with nothing. She lifted her head, and her green eyes were wet. I rebuilt all of it. The money, the company, the house, all of it. I built it bigger than it ever was before, and I told myself every single day for 9 years that the lesson of my life was that no one could be trusted, that every kindness was a transaction, that every smile hid a knife. She drew a long breath, and then yesterday morning a man I had never met in my life sat down on a bench beside me and gave me everything he owned, and I came home, and I sat in my study, and I looked at the money, and I realized that I had been wrong. I had been wrong for 9 years. Ryan did not know what to say. I have come here this morning, Mr. Hale, to do 2 things. Will you allow me to do them? Ma'am, I. Just say yes, Mr. Hale. He nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. She reached into her coat pocket and took out an envelope. She placed it on the small coffee table between them. In this envelope is a check for $10,000. It is a personal gift from me to you. There are no conditions on it. There is no string attached. You may use it for whatever you wish. I would suggest you start by buying your daughter a pair of boots, a refrigerator full of groceries, and paying whatever bills are past due. The rest is yours to do with as you see fit. He stared at the envelope. Ma'am, I cannot. You can, Mr. Hale. You will. Because the second thing I am here to do is to offer you a job. He looked up. A job. At my company. I have been looking for a director of veteran affairs and community outreach for 6 months. The position has been empty because every candidate my human resources department has sent me has been wrong. They have all been wrong because they were the kind of people who would send me resumes. I do not want a resume, Mr. Hale. I want a man who knows what it is like to have $18 in his pocket and give them away to a stranger. She paused. The position pays $115,000 a year. Full medical, dental, and vision benefits effective immediately. A retirement plan with company match. 4 weeks of paid leave annually. And the responsibility of building a program from the ground up that will help veterans like yourself transition out of the service and into meaningful civilian work. Ryan could not speak. He could not move. He could not breathe. You may take a week to think about it, she said. Or you may answer me right now. The offer will not change. He looked at her. He looked at the envelope on the table. He looked at the closed bedroom door behind which his daughter was just beginning to stir. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Ma'am, why are you doing this? Celeste Ardon looked at him for a long, long moment, and when she answered, her voice was very gentle. Because, Mr. Hale, you sat down on a bench beside an old woman in the cold and you gave her everything you had, and the very least I can do is sit down on a couch beside the man who did it and try to give him a little bit of his life back. For nearly a full minute, Ryan Hale did not move. He sat on the worn chair across from this woman who had walked into his apartment and in less time than it took him to drink a cup of coffee, offered him more money than he had ever held in his hands at one time in his entire life. Ma'am, he said finally. His voice was rough. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I do. But I can't take this. Celeste did not blink. And why is that, Mr. Hale? Because I didn't help you to get something back. If I take that money, then what I did yesterday wasn't a kindness. It was a transaction. And I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking that's how the world works. She studied him for a long moment. Mr. Hale, may I ask you a question? Yes, ma'am. If I came to you tomorrow and told you that your daughter Emma had won a scholarship for being a kind and good child, would you turn it down? He frowned. No, ma'am, I wouldn't. Why not? Because that would be hers. She earned it. Then why is this any different? He opened his mouth and closed it again. Mr. Hale, I am a businesswoman. I do not give money away. I have not given a single dollar away to a single person in 9 years that wasn't routed through an accountant and a tax write-off. What I am doing in this room right now is not a tax write-off. It is not a transaction. It is the only thing a person in my position can do when they have been shown the kind of thing you showed me yesterday. She leaned forward slightly. You think you don't deserve this. I am telling you that if you don't deserve this, then no one in this country deserves anything. Take the envelope. Buy your daughter a pair of boots. He looked at the envelope on the coffee table. He looked at the closed bedroom door. He looked back at her. And the job, ma'am. The job is exactly what I said it is. A real position, a real salary, real responsibilities. I have been looking for someone for 6 months because the person I need does not exist on a resume. The person I need has lived the life that the people I want to help are living right now. That is you, Mr. Hale. I knew it before I ever climbed into that car yesterday afternoon. He shook his head slowly. Ma'am, I'm a chief petty officer. I run logistics on a base. I move pallets and people and paper. I don't have any business running a program for a billion-dollar company. Mr. Hale, in 22 years of military service, you have moved more freight than my top 3 regional managers combined. Do not sit there and tell me you are not qualified to do a job I am offering you. I have had a team going through your service record since 6 o'clock last night. You are more qualified than any candidate Human Resources has put in front of me. She paused. What you are, Mr. Hale, is afraid. He stiffened. Ma'am, I have been a lot of things in my life. Afraid is not usually one of them. It is now. And it is a good thing. Because if you weren't afraid, you would not be the right man for this job. The right man for this job needs to know what fear feels like. He needs to remember what it feels like to be the kind of man veterans walk into an office and meet for the first time. He needs to look at them and see himself. That is what I am hiring. That is the job. Ryan was quiet for a long time. He thought about Emma. He thought about the boots she needed. He thought about the rent that was 3 weeks late. He thought about the coffee can in the cupboard with $60 hidden inside it. He thought about his father. His father had been a hard man. A proud man. The kind of man who never took a handout in his life, who would have died with empty pockets before he asked another human being for a dime. Ryan had loved him and feared him in equal measure. And the lesson he had learned at his father's knee was the lesson that had carried him for 41 years. A man takes care of himself. A man does not lean on others. A man stands on his own 2 feet, and if his feet give out, he gets up and stands again. But his father had died at 58, broke and bitter, with a daughter-in-law he had barely met, and a grandchild he would never see in a hospital room he could not afford in a town that had given up on him long before the cancer did. And Ryan had stood at his graveside in the rain and made a promise to himself. I will not die like that. I will not let my child stand at my grave and wonder why I would not let anyone help me. He looked up. Ma'am? Yes, Mr. Hale. I'd like to think about the job. Of course. But the envelope? Yes. I'll take the envelope, and I will pay you back every dollar of it, with interest. I don't know when, but I will. Celeste smiled for the first time. It was a small smile, almost shy on a face that did not seem accustomed to it. Mr. Hale, if you insist on paying me back, then I will accept your repayment. But I will tell you this. Whatever interest you decide to pay me, I will donate to the first veteran your office serves once you take the job. That is the only condition I will insist on. He stared at her. Then very slowly, he extended his hand across the coffee table. "Ma'am, you have a deal." She shook his hand. Her grip was firm. Her eyes did not leave his. "Take a week, Mr. Hale. Speak to your daughter. Speak to whoever you need to speak to. I will have a car at this address next Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. If you are in it, then you have a job. If you are not, then I will respect your decision, and you will hear from me no more." She rose. He rose with her. "And one more thing, Mr. Hale." "Yes, ma'am." She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "My name is Celeste. I would prefer it if you called me that going forward." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Celeste." She let herself out. He stood in the open doorway and watched her walk down the hall to the elevator that hadn't worked since spring and then take the stairs without missing a step. A few moments later, through the window, he saw her climb into the back of the black car. Harlan closed the door behind her. The car pulled away from the curb and disappeared down the street. Ryan closed his apartment door. He stood with his back against it for a long moment. Then he walked over to the coffee table, picked up the envelope, and carefully tore it open. The check was made out to Ryan D. Hale, $10,000 and 0 cents. The signature at the bottom was small and neat. Celeste M. Ardon. He stared at it. He sat down on the couch, very slowly, still holding the check. And then, for the second time in 2 days, Chief Petty Officer Ryan Hale covered his face with his hands and cried, except this time the tears were not from grief. He picked Emma up from school that afternoon at 3:15 exactly on time, and on the way home, he turned the truck into the parking lot of a department store on Tidewater Drive. She looked up at him from the passenger seat. "Daddy, why are we stopping here?" "Because, Sunshine, we are going inside and you are going to pick out a new pair of boots." She stared at him. "Daddy, boots are expensive." "I know they are, baby." Megan's mom said, "Emma, look at me." She turned her face up to his. "Daddy got some good news today. Some really good news. And I want you to come inside with me, and I want you to pick out the prettiest pair of boots you can find, and I do not want you to look at the price tag. You hear me?" "Are you sure, Daddy?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." She unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. He came around to the passenger side, opened her door, and lifted her down to the pavement. She slipped her small hand into his, and he closed his fingers around hers, and together they walked across the parking lot to the front doors. Inside the store was bright and warm. Emma walked through the children's section with her mouth slightly open, looking at all the boots lined up on the shelves, like soldiers at attention. Ryan watched her face and felt something he had not felt in a long, long time. He felt like a father who could provide for his child. She picked a pair of brown boots with pink stitching along the side. They cost $42. Ryan helped her try them on, made sure they fit properly with room to grow, and then he carried them to the register. The clerk was a young woman with a friendly smile. "Will that be all today, sir?" He looked down at Emma. "Sunshine, do you need a new winter coat?" "My old one still fits, Daddy." "Are you sure? It still fits. The sleeves are just a little short. Mrs. Petrov let the cuffs down for me." He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the clerk. "Where are your winter coats, ma'am?" "Aisle 6, sir. Right side." He carried Emma over and let her pick one out. She chose a purple coat with a fur-trimmed hood. $65. He added it to the pile. Then he found the pajama section and let her pick out 2 new sets because the ones she had been wearing were starting to be too short at the ankles. Then he walked her over to the underwear section and bought her a 6-pack of socks and a 6-pack of underpants because he had noticed last week that hers were getting thin. By the time he got to the register, the total was $197. He paid in cash from the envelope. Emma watched him wide-eyed as he counted out the bills. "Daddy? Where did all that money come from?" He bent down to her level. "From a kind person, Sunshine. From a very kind person who I helped yesterday morning. And she remembered me, and she came back and she helped us in return." "Like a fairy tale." He smiled. "Yeah, baby. A little bit like a fairy tale." They put the bags in the truck, and Ryan drove to the grocery store next. He filled a cart. Real groceries. Milk and bread and butter and eggs. chicken and ground beef and pork chops, fruit, vegetables, pasta and rice, and a real jar of spaghetti sauce. The good kind, not the store brand. A box of pancake mix. A bottle of real maple syrup. A jar of peanut butter. A new jar of grape jelly. Cereal that wasn't on sale. A package of those little juice boxes Emma loved that he hadn't been able to afford in 3 months. A whole roast chicken from the deli case for dinner. Emma walked beside the cart and stared at it the entire time. When they got to the freezer aisle, he stopped in front of the ice cream. "Sunshine, what kind do you want?" She looked up at him with her brown eyes wide. "Daddy, we never get ice cream." "We are getting ice cream tonight." "Are you sure?" "Pick one out, Em. Whatever flavor you want." She walked the length of the freezer case, very slowly, looking at each carton with the seriousness of a judge in a courtroom. She chose chocolate chip cookie dough. He put it in the cart. And then on impulse, he put a second one in. Strawberry. The kind his wife had loved. The total at the register was $148.63. He paid in cash, and the clerk did not ask any questions, and on the way out, Emma slipped her hand into his and squeezed it 3 times. It was their old signal. 3 squeezes meant "I love you." He squeezed back 4 times. "I love you more." When they got home, he carried the groceries up the 3 flights of stairs in 5 trips. He filled the refrigerator until the door barely closed. He filled the cabinets. He filled the freezer. And when he was done, he stood in the small kitchen and looked at it all, and he felt a weight come off his chest that he had been carrying so long he had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. That night they had roast chicken and mashed potatoes and green beans and a slice of bakery bread with real butter. Emma ate 3 helpings. She had a bowl of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream for dessert. She fell asleep on the couch at 7:30 with her stomach full and her cheeks pink, and the new purple coat draped across her legs like a blanket. Ryan sat in the armchair across from the couch and watched her sleep for a long time. Then he picked her up, carried her to her bedroom, tucked her into bed, kissed her forehead, and turned off the light. He went into the kitchen and sat down at the table. He took out his phone. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he scrolled through his contacts and found a number he had not called in a year and a half. It rang twice. "Brennan." "Sir." "It's Hale." There was a pause. "Chief, how are you holding up?" "Sir, I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer." "Go ahead." "If I had a job offer, a civilian job, director-level position with a private logistics company in Norfolk, salary in the 6 figures, would you tell me to take it?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Chief, are you telling me you got a job offer in 24 hours?" "Yes, sir." "From who?" "Ardan Logistics, sir." The silence on the other end of the line stretched out for so long that Ryan thought the call had dropped. "Chief, Ardan Logistics, as in Celeste Ardan." "Yes, sir." "Hale, listen to me very carefully. Celeste Ardan does not hire chief petty officers. She hires Harvard MBAs and former military generals. How in the hell did she end up offering you a job?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. "Sir, it's a long story." "Try me." He told him. The whole thing. The bus stop. The $18. The knock on the door at 8:14 in the morning. The check on the coffee table. The job offer. When he was finished, Brennan was silent for a long time. "Chief?" "Yes, sir." "You take that job. You take it tomorrow morning. Do not wait a week. Do not think about it. Do not ask permission from anyone. You take that job, and you do not look back." "Sir, I don't know if I'm qualified." "Hale, I'm going to tell you something I have never told you before. The reason your name was on that list yesterday was because I was the one who put it there." Ryan went very still. "Sir, they asked me to give them 3 names from my division. 3 good men I could afford to lose. I had a meeting with the regional commander last week. He told me there were going to be cuts, and the writing was on the wall, and I needed to give him 3 names by Monday. And I sat in my office for 2 days, and I went through my entire division, every man I have, and I had to choose 3. And one of the 3 was you." Ryan felt something cold settle in his chest. Why, sir? Because, Chief, you have been a Chief Petty Officer for 9 years. You are at the top of your pay grade. You do not have a college degree. The Navy has nothing more to offer you, and you have nothing more to offer the Navy. You are not going to make warrant officer. You are not going to make senior chief, not in your field, not at your station. The best the Navy can do for you is keep you at the same desk for another 19 years until you retire. And every year that you stay here, the Navy is going to pay you more, and you are going to fall further and further behind in the civilian world. Sir, Hale, I put your name on that list because I have known you for 6 years, and I have watched you come into work every morning, carrying the weight of a dead wife and a young daughter and a bank account that runs out before the month does. And I have watched you smile through it, and salute through it, and never complain about it. And I knew that if I did not push you out of this Navy, you would stay in it until it killed you. You would stay in it for the steady paycheck and the health insurance for your little girl, and you would die at a desk in a building you hate, working for a country that has already given you every medal it is going to give you. His voice grew quieter. I put your name on that list because I love you like a brother, Chief, and the kindest thing I could do for you was to push you out the door. I was going to call you tonight. I was going to tell you I had a contact at a defense contractor in Virginia Beach. I was going to ask if you wanted me to make a call. Ryan could not speak. And now you sit here and tell me that 24 hours after I put your name on that list, Celeste Ardon herself walked into your apartment and offered you a 6-figure job with full benefits because you gave her $18 at a bus stop. Chief, you take that job. Do you hear me? You take that job, and you go, and you build a life for that little girl that I know her mother is up there praying for. You do not call me back. You do not thank me. You go, and you take that job, and you live. Chief, you live. The line went silent. Ryan sat at the kitchen table in the small apartment with his hand pressed against his mouth. Outside, somewhere down on the street, a car went by. Inside Emma's room, the soft sound of her breathing came through the half-open door. When he could finally speak, his voice was thick. Sir, thank you. You don't owe me anything, Chief. Now hang up the phone and go take care of your daughter. The line went dead. Ryan set the phone down on the table. He sat there for a long time looking at nothing. Then he got up, walked to Emma's room, opened the door a few inches, and stood watching her sleep. Her purple coat was on the chair beside her bed. Her new boots were lined up neatly on the floor side by side the way he had taught her to leave them. Her stuffed rabbit was tucked under her arm. Sweetheart, he whispered even though she could not hear him. Daddy is going to take that job. He closed the door gently. He went back to the kitchen, opened the cupboard above the stove, took down the coffee can, and put the $60 back in his wallet where it belonged. He put the can back on the shelf, empty now, and he closed the cupboard door. He did not need to hide money from himself anymore. The black Lincoln pulled up in front of the apartment building at exactly 8 o'clock the following Tuesday morning. Ryan was waiting on the curb in a navy blue suit he had bought at a discount men's store on Saturday afternoon for $98. It was the first new suit he had owned in 12 years. The tie was a darker blue plain, no pattern. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, the way the Navy had taught him 40 years ago. His hair was freshly cut. He had shaved twice that morning to be sure. Emma stood beside him in her new purple coat and her brown boots with the pink stitching. Mrs. Petrov stood on the other side of her holding her hand. The driver's door opened and Harlan stepped out. Mr. Hale, good morning, sir. Good morning. Just Ryan, please. Yes, sir. Harlan tipped his hat to Emma. And good morning to you, young lady. Emma looked up at him solemnly. Are you going to drive my daddy to his new job? I am Miss. Will you drive him careful? Harlan smiled. I will drive him very careful, miss. You have my word. Ryan knelt down on the sidewalk. Emma threw her arms around his neck. You be good for Mrs. Petrov today, sunshine. I will. You go to school. You learn everything they teach you. And when I pick you up tonight, I want to hear all about it. Daddy. Yes, baby. Are you nervous? He thought about it. A little bit, yes. You don't have to be nervous. You're the bravest person I know. He pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, Emma. I love you more. He kissed her, stood up, shook Mrs. Petrov's hand, and climbed into the back seat of the Lincoln. Harlan closed the door behind him with a soft thud of expensive metal. Through the tinted window, Ryan watched his daughter wave at him from the sidewalk until the car pulled around the corner and she was gone from sight. He folded his hands in his lap. Harlan. Yes, sir. How long have you worked for Miss Arden? 19 years, sir. I drove for her father before her going back another 6 years. 25 years with the same family. Yes, sir. That says something about her. Harlan met his eyes in the rearview mirror. It says a great deal about her, sir. Yes, it does. They drove in silence for several blocks. Sir. Yes, Harlan. May I say something, sir? Please. Harlan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. I have known Celeste Ardon since she was a young woman. I drove her to her wedding. I drove her father to her wedding. I drove her mother to the hospital the morning her mother passed. And I drove her 6 years ago to the courthouse where her marriage ended. He paused. I have not seen her smile in 9 years, sir. Not really. She smiles for cameras. She smiles for board meetings. She smiles for the press. But I have not seen her smile from her heart in 9 years. Not until last Wednesday morning when she came down the stairs with a folder under her arm and told me to bring the Lincoln around and drive her to your apartment. Ryan looked out the window. What I am trying to say, sir, is that whatever you did at that bus stop last week, you did more than give a woman $18. You gave her something back that she lost a long time ago. And I have been driving for 46 years, and I have never thanked a passenger of mine for a thing in my life. But I am thanking you, sir. From all of us who work for her who have watched her carry that weight all these years. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Ryan did not trust himself to speak for several seconds. Harlan. Yes, sir. I didn't do anything special. I just sat down on a bench. With respect, sir, that is exactly the point. The car pulled onto the highway and headed north toward downtown. The headquarters of Ardon Logistics rose 22 stories above the harbor, a tower of dark glass and pale stone with the company's name in brushed steel letters above the front entrance. Harlan turned the Lincoln into a private underground garage and parked in a space marked CEO. Miss Arden asked that I bring you up directly, sir. All right. They rode a private elevator to the 22nd floor in silence. The doors opened onto a corridor of polished wood and soft lighting. At the far end, a young woman in a charcoal suit stood waiting. Mr. Hale, I'm Iris Chen, Miss Arden's Chief of Staff. Welcome to Ardon Logistics. Thank you, ma'am. She's expecting you. Iris led him down the corridor to a tall set of double doors. She knocked once, opened the right-hand door, and stepped aside. Mr. Hale, ma'am. Send him in, Iris, and cancel my 10 o'clock. Yes, ma'am. Ryan stepped inside. Celeste rose from behind a long desk of dark wood. She was wearing a tailored gray suit, and her auburn hair was pinned up. She looked for a moment like a different person entirely from the woman who had sat on his couch a week ago. But then she crossed the room and held out her hand, and her eyes were the same. Mr. Hale, welcome. Just Ryan, ma'am, please. Then it is just Celeste Ryan, we agreed. He shook her hand. I see you're here, she said. I was not certain you would be. I almost wasn't, ma'am. Celeste. What changed your mind? He thought for a moment. My commanding officer told me I would be a fool not to take the job. And then I looked at my daughter at dinner on Saturday night eating real food off a real plate, and I thought to myself that any man who turned this down would be turning down more than a paycheck. He would be turning down a future, and I am too old and too tired to turn down a future anymore. She nodded slowly. Then let me show you what your future looks like. Come. She led him through a side door into a smaller office half the size of hers, but still finer than any room he had ever worked in. There was a wide desk by the window, a leather chair, a small conference table, and a framed photograph already hanging on the wall behind the desk. He stopped when he saw it. The photograph was of him in his navy dress whites, standing on the deck of a ship. He was younger. Sarah was beside him. They had taken the picture on the day of their wedding 15 years ago. He turned to her slowly. "Where did you get that?" "Your commanding officer sent it over yesterday afternoon, along with a recommendation letter that I would frame and put on a wall if I were a more sentimental woman. He wanted to be sure that on the day you walked into this office, you would see what you have already accomplished, and not just what is in front of you." Ryan walked to the wall and stood in front of the photograph. "That was a long time ago." "Yes, she would have liked this. Sarah. She would have liked this office. She always told me I was meant for more than what I let myself become." Celeste was quiet for a moment. "Then perhaps it is time, Ryan, to become what she always saw in you." He turned and looked at her. She held his gaze. "There will be a learning curve. You will have a great deal to absorb. You will report directly to me, but Iris and a senior vice president named Thomas Park will be available to you for any operational questions. Your team will consist of 3 people initially, and you will hire 3 more in the first 60 days. You will travel some but not extensively, and never without 3 days' notice, so you can arrange care for Emma. You will have your own assistant. Her name is Margaret. She is starting today. She has been with the company for 11 years, and she will tell you the truth about everything, which is exactly the kind of person you need next to you." "Yes, ma'am. Celeste." "There is one more thing." She walked over to the desk and picked up a slim folder. She handed it to him. "What is this?" "Open it." He opened the folder. It was a contract. He did not understand most of the language, but the salary was there in plain numbers exactly as she had told him. $115,000 per year. Health insurance fully paid for him and 1 dependent. A retirement contribution of 7% of his salary matched by the company. 4 weeks of paid vacation. A signing bonus. He stopped on the signing bonus and read the number twice. "Celeste." "Yes." "This says $50,000. "Yes, it does." "Ma'am, that is not a signing bonus. That is a small fortune. It is precisely the amount I calculated you would need to pay off any debt you currently have secure first and last month's rent on a better apartment in a safer school district. Purchase a reliable second-hand vehicle to replace the truck. I am told has 240,000 miles on it, and put aside an emergency fund equivalent to 3 months of your new salary so that you and your daughter never again have to know what it feels like to have $18 in your wallet on a Tuesday morning." He stared at the page. "I cannot accept this." "You can, Ryan, and you will, because if you do not accept it, then I will have to pay it to you in some other form, and that will create a great deal of paperwork for Iris, who is a very busy woman, and you do not want to be the man who created paperwork for Iris on his first day of employment." For the first time since he had walked into the building, he laughed. It surprised him. He had not expected it to come out. It was a short, low laugh, but it was real. "All right, ma'am. Celeste, all right. I will sign it." "Good." She handed him a pen. He sat down at the desk. He read every line of the contract slowly and carefully, the way his father had taught him to read every contract he ever signed. When he was finished, he looked up at her. "There is nothing in here about loyalty. There is no clause that says I have to stay for a certain number of years. No, there is not. Why not? Because, Ryan, I do not buy loyalty. I have tried. It does not work. The only loyalty worth having is the kind a person gives freely. If you decide in 6 months that this is not the right place for you, you will leave with my blessing, and you will keep every dollar I have paid you, and we will part as friends. I would rather have a man for 1 year who wants to be here than a man for 10 years who has been bought." He looked down at the contract. He uncapped the pen. He signed his name on the line at the bottom. Celeste reached across the desk and shook his hand a second time. "Welcome to Ardon Logistics, Ryan." "Thank you, Celeste." She held his hand for just a moment longer than was necessary. Then she let it go and took a step back, and her face shifted back into the professional mask she wore for the world. "Margaret will be in shortly. She will give you a tour of the building, get you set up with credentials and a phone, and walk you through your first week." I have a board meeting at 1 o'clock that I cannot move, but I would like to have lunch with you on Friday if you are available. We have things to discuss about the program you will be building, and I would like to do it somewhere other than a conference room." "I would like that, ma'am. Celeste." She nodded once and turned to leave. At the door she stopped. "Ryan?" "Yes." She did not turn around. She kept her hand on the doorframe. "Thank you for coming today." She left. He stood alone in his new office for a long time. He looked at the photograph on the wall. He looked at the contract on the desk. He looked at the harbor through the window 22 stories below, where in the distance a Navy ship was moving slowly out to sea. He sat down in the leather chair. He picked up the desk phone. He dialed the number for Mrs. Petrov. She answered on the second ring. "Hello." "Mrs. Petrov, it's Ryan." "Ryan, is everything all right? You at new job?" "I'm at the new job. Mrs. Petrov, I want to ask you something." "Yes." "How much would you charge to watch Emma full-time mornings and afternoons every weekday? The way you do now, but with more hours, and with my full salary behind it." There was a pause. "Ryan, I cannot ask for so much." "You're not asking. I'm offering $300 a week, cash, every Friday, for as long as you want the work." $300 a week. That is a great deal of money. Mrs. Petrov, you have looked after my daughter for 2 years. You have fed her dinner when I could not. You have stayed late when I was at the warehouse. You have loved her. I know what that has been worth to me. I am paying you the proper rate now. Will you take it?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick. "I will take it." "Thank you, Ryan. Thank you." "Thank you, Mrs. Petrov. I will see you tonight." He hung up the phone. The door to his office opened, and a tall, gray-haired woman in a navy blue dress stepped in. "Mr. Hale, I'm Margaret Sullivan, your assistant." He stood up and shook her hand. "Margaret, pleasure to meet you." She looked him up and down with a frank evaluating gaze that reminded him of a senior chief he had served under in the Persian Gulf. "I have been with this company for 11 years, Mr. Hale. I have seen 6 executives come and go through this floor, so I am going to tell you the same thing I told each one of them on their first day. Do you want to hear it? Please, treat me with respect, tell me the truth, and trust me to do my job, and we will get along very well. Do any of those 3 things wrong, and we will have a problem. Are we clear?" He smiled. "Margaret, we are very clear." "Good." She gestured at the door. "Then let me show you your floor. There are people you should meet." He followed her out of the office and into the rest of his new life. That afternoon at 3:30, instead of waiting on the curb outside the school, like he had done every day for 2 years, Ryan pulled the Lincoln up to the front entrance of Emma's elementary school. Harlan was driving him for the first week until he could pick out a vehicle of his own. The school bell rang, and the doors opened, and a stream of children came pouring out into the cold. He waited until he saw her purple coat. She was looking around for the truck. He rolled down the back window. "Sunshine." She stopped walking. She stared at the Lincoln with her mouth open. "Daddy." "Get in, baby. I want to take you somewhere." She walked over slowly, and Harlan came around to open the door for her. She climbed up into the back seat beside her father and looked around at the leather and the small television screen and the tinted windows and the bottle of cold water in the cup holder. "Daddy, this is a fancy car." "Yes, it is. Did you really get the job?" "I really got the job, Sunshine." She threw herself across the seat and into his arms. He held her tight against his chest. "I am so proud of you, Daddy. I am proud of us, Em. Both of us. We did this together." Harlan started the engine and pulled away from the school. "Where are we going, Daddy?" "I want to show you something. I want to show you where I work." He took her to the building. He carried her on his hip through the lobby. He walked her past the security guards who tipped their hats to him and past the receptionist who smiled. He took her up the private elevator to the 22nd floor. He walked her down the corridor to his office. He opened the door and stood back so she could go in first. She stepped inside. She looked around. She walked over to the desk. She climbed up into the leather chair and her feet did not touch the floor, and she put her small hands on the desk. She turned and looked at him with her brown eyes wide. "This is your office, Daddy. This is my office, baby. For real. For real." She spun the chair in a slow circle. She giggled. "It even spins." "Yes, it does." She stopped the chair and looked at the photograph on the wall. She studied it for a long moment. "That's you and Mommy." "Yes, sunshine." "On your wedding day." "Yes." "She is very pretty." "Yes, she is." She would have liked this office. He had to swallow before he could answer. "Yes, M. I think she would have." She climbed down from the chair and walked over to him and slipped her hand into his. "Daddy." "Yes, baby. Can we go home now? I want to tell Mrs. Petrov about your office." "We can go home. Of course we can go home." He carried her back down to the car. On the drive home, she fell asleep against his side with one small hand wrapped around his finger. Harlan met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Long day for the young lady, sir." "Long day for everyone, Harlan." "Yes, sir." The Lincoln moved smoothly through the late afternoon traffic, carrying them home through a city that for the first time in 7 years did not feel like it was waiting to take something else from him. The first 3 months at Ardon Logistics passed in a blur of long days and longer nights. Ryan threw himself into the work with the same discipline that had carried him through 22 years in the Navy. He arrived at the building at 6:30 every morning. He read every report Margaret put in front of him. He sat in on meetings he barely understood, took notes he could barely read, and went home at night with binders under his arm that he studied at the kitchen table after Emma had gone to bed. By the end of the first month, he had hired his first 3 employees. All of them were veterans. One was a former Marine staff sergeant who had been driving a delivery truck for 9 years because no one had ever sat down and asked him what else he could do. Another was a Navy corpsman with 2 combat tours who had been working the overnight shift at a gas station. The third was an Army logistics officer, a single mother with 2 boys, who had been turned down for 46 jobs in 14 months because no employer wanted to gamble on a woman with 2 kids and a gap on her resume. Ryan hired all 3 of them in the first week. By the end of the second month, the program had its first 10 enrolled veterans. Real positions, real salaries, real benefits. 6 were placed inside Ardon Logistics. The other 4 were placed with partner companies that Celeste, with 1 phone call each, had persuaded to open their doors. By the end of the third month, the number was 40. Celeste sat across from him at lunch on a Friday in early May in a small Italian restaurant a few blocks from the building. She had taken him to lunch every Friday since the day he started. He had come to look forward to it the way a man looks forward to coming home. 40 placements in 12 weeks, Ryan. Yes, ma'am. Celeste. Iris ran the numbers this morning. The retention rate on your hires is 94%. The industry average for new placements at this level is 61. That's because we are placing the right people in the right places, ma'am. Most of the time, the rest of the world is just guessing. She sipped her water. You are a remarkable man, Ryan Hale. He looked down at his plate. Ma'am, may I tell you something? Always. For the first 10 years of my marriage, my wife told me almost every day that I was meant for more than what I was doing. I never believed her. I thought she was being kind. I thought she was being a wife. I thought she was saying the things wives say. He paused. It turns out she was right. Celeste did not answer for a moment. She set her water glass down very gently on the table. She was right, Ryan. She was very right. Outside the window, a young couple walked past, pushing a stroller. A pigeon landed on the curb. The waiter brought their bread. Celeste. Yes. I want to ask you something, and I do not want it to be awkward. So I am going to ask it once, and you can answer it however you want, and then we will not speak of it again, unless you want to. She set her napkin down. Go ahead. He took a breath. Why do you take me to lunch every Friday? She looked at him for a long moment. Because, Ryan, you are the only person in my life who knew me before he knew who I was. Everyone else I have spoken to in the last 15 years sat across from me, knowing exactly how much money I had in the bank. You sat down on a bench beside an old woman in a coat. And every Friday at noon, when I sit across from you in this restaurant, I remember what it felt like to be a person before I was a portfolio." She paused. "And because if I am very honest, I have not stopped thinking about that morning, not for a single day, and I do not believe I ever will." He nodded slowly. "All right, ma'am. Celeste, thank you for telling me." "You're welcome. I will not bring it up again." "Ryan." "Yes." "I did not say I did not want you to bring it up again." He looked up. She held his eyes for a long moment, and then she picked up her menu and pretended to study it, even though both of them knew she had it memorized. He picked up his menu and did the same thing. They did not speak of it again that day. But the silence between them for the rest of that lunch was not the silence of awkwardness. It was the silence of two people who had said something true to each other, and who were both letting it settle. Check. By the time summer arrived, Ryan had moved out of the apartment with the water stain on the ceiling. He found a small house in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from the office, with 3 bedrooms and a backyard and a swing set the previous owners had left behind. The school district was one of the best in the county. The neighbors were 2 retired school teachers on one side and a young Marine family on the other. He paid the down payment in cash from his signing bonus, the way his father would have done. Mrs. Petrov rode in the moving truck with him on the day they moved in. He had paid her 3 months' salary in advance and asked her to come with them, and she had wept on the steps of the apartment building when he asked. Her own apartment was in the building. She had lived there for 16 years. She had no children of her own. He had bought a small in-law suite addition with the new house, a single room with its own bathroom over the garage, and he had told her that it was hers if she wanted it for as long as she wanted it free of rent. She moved in the same day they did. That first night they ate dinner on the back deck. Hot dogs from the grill, macaroni salad, watermelon. Emma ran in circles in the grass with a sparkler in her hand, even though the 4th of July was still 2 weeks away. Mrs. Petrov sat in a folding chair and held her tea and watched her with eyes that shone in the porch light. Ryan stood at the grill and watched both of them, and he felt the kind of full, quiet happiness that he had not felt since the first 6 months of his marriage. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. It was Celeste. "Hey." "Hey yourself. How is the new house?" Loud. "Emma is running with sparklers." "Already?" "She found a box in the closet from the last tenant. I figured I had to let her use them. It's a moving in tradition." "It's a moving in something. I'm not sure it's a tradition." He laughed. "Celeste." "Yes." "Would you like to come over?" There was a long pause. "Right now?" "Yes, right now. We have hot dogs. They are not very fancy, but we have plenty." Another pause. "Ryan?" "Yes." "I will be there in 40 minutes. She arrived in 38. She came alone in a small silver car he had never seen her drive before, wearing jeans and a blue cotton blouse and white sneakers. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She did not look like the chief executive officer of a logistics empire. She looked like a woman who had come over for hot dogs. Emma met her at the door. She had a sparkler in one hand. "Are you Miss Celeste?" "I am." "My daddy said you were coming over." He did. Emma looked her up and down, with the same evaluating gaze her father had used on her own first day at the office. "You are very pretty." "Thank you, Emma." "Are you my daddy's friend?" Celeste paused for just a moment. "I am. Yes, I am your daddy's friend." "Okay. You can come in." Emma turned and ran back into the house, leaving the sparkler in a jar of water on the porch. Celeste watched her go. When she turned back, Ryan was standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry. She has no filter. She got that from her mother. It is the best thing about her so far. Don't change it." He stepped aside. She walked into his house. She ate 2 hot dogs and a small bowl of macaroni salad and a slice of watermelon. She sat on the back deck with Mrs. Petrov, who pretended to be skeptical of her for about 4 minutes, and then warmed to her completely after Celeste asked in serviceable Russian about the village she had grown up in. Mrs. Petrov nearly cried, After Emma was put to bed, Celeste and Ryan sat on the back porch in two folding chairs with the cicadas singing in the dark and the porch light turned down low. Mrs. Petrov had said goodnight an hour earlier and gone up to her room above the garage. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Ryan. Yes. I haven't sat on a porch in 9 years. Not like this. Not without something to do. It is one of the better things in life. Sitting on a porch. Yes, it seems to be. Another silence. Celeste. Yes. I want to tell you something. And I am going to tell it to you because I have been thinking about it for 3 months, and I do not believe I will be able to think about anything else until I tell it to you. She turned her head and looked at him. Go ahead. He set his glass of iced tea down on the porch railing. My wife died 7 years ago. I held her hand when she did. The last thing she said to me was that I was not to be alone forever. She made me promise. She said it was not natural for a man to be alone, and that it was not what she wanted for me, and that one day there would be someone. And when that day came, I was not to be afraid of it. He paused. I have been alone for 7 years. I have not even looked at another woman, not once. I did not believe that there would be someone. I thought she was wrong. I thought she had said it because she was dying, and because it was the kind of thing a person says to make the person they love feel better. He turned and looked at her. And then, about 6 weeks ago, ma'am. Celeste. I was sitting in my office and Margaret brought in some papers, and I looked up to thank her, and then I looked back down at the papers, and I realized that I had not looked at the photograph on the wall of my wife in 3 days. Not because I did not love her. I love her still. I will love her until the day I die. But because for the first time since she went into the ground, I had been thinking of someone else. He stopped. He looked at her in the dim light from the porch. I have been thinking of you, Celeste. I do not know how to say it any plainer than that. I am 41 years old. I am too old to play games. I am thinking of you, and I do not know what you want me to do with that information. But I figured I owed it to both of us to put it in your hands and let you decide. For a long time she did not move. Then she reached across the small space between the two chairs, and she took his hand in hers, and she did not let it go. Ryan Hale. Yes. Do you remember what you said to me in your apartment the morning I came to offer you the job? I said a lot of things, ma'am. You said your father told you that any fool can be generous when he is rich, that the test of a man is whether he can be generous when he is broke. Yes, he did say that. I have been thinking about that, Ryan. I have been thinking about it for 3 months, and I have decided that he was right about a great many things, but I would like to add something to it if I may. Please. Any fool can love when she has nothing to lose. The test of a woman is whether she can love when she has been hurt and is afraid and has spent 9 years building a wall around her heart so high that she could not see over it anymore. She squeezed his hand. I am still afraid, Ryan. I am still afraid every single day. But I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of sitting in a house with 20 rooms and not one person to talk to. I am tired of taking lunch with my chief of staff and pretending it is friendship. I am tired of being right about how cold the world is when I know now for a fact that I was wrong. She paused. You showed me I was wrong. You sat down on a bench in February and you handed me $18 and you walked away. And I have not been the same person since. I do not know how to repay that, Ryan. I do not believe I can, but I would very much like to spend whatever time I have left trying. He closed his fingers around hers. For a long time the only sound was the cicadas in the dark. Celeste. Yes, I will take you on a date on Friday night. A real one. I will pick you up in my own truck. I will take you to dinner somewhere nice, but not too nice, because I am still a chief petty officer at heart, and a place too fancy makes me nervous. We will eat. We will talk. I will pay the check, and you will let me. Even though you make 20 times what I do, because that is how I would like to do this. She laughed. It was a soft laugh, a real one. All right, Ryan, all right. And I would like if you are willing for you to meet my daughter properly. Not as her father's friend. As something more than that. but not until you are sure. I will not let her get attached to a person who is not certain. She has lost too much already in her short life. I will be certain before I meet her again, Ryan. I give you my word." He nodded slowly. He lifted her hand in his, and he turned it over, and he pressed a slow, careful kiss to the back of it. "Good night, Celeste." "Good night, Ryan." She drove home with her hand still tingling where his lips had touched it, and for the first time in 9 years, she did not feel afraid of what tomorrow would bring. A year later, on a clear, bright Saturday in early June, Celeste Ardon stood in front of 56 guests in the backyard of a small house in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from her office. She wore a simple ivory dress. Ryan stood across from her in a dark gray suit. Emma stood between them, holding a small bouquet of white flowers. Mrs. Petrov sat in the front row, with tears running freely down her face. Harlan stood at the back where he had been asked to stand in a suit that he had owned for 40 years and had never once worn until that day. The judge was a woman who had served with Ryan in the Navy 20 years earlier, before she had gone to law school. She read the words slowly and clearly, and Ryan and Celeste said yes, and the words were said, and the rings were exchanged. And when the judge said that they could kiss, Emma giggled, and Celeste leaned down and kissed her on the top of the head before she leaned up to kiss Ryan on the mouth. That night, after the guests had gone home after Emma had been put to bed in her bedroom with the new pink curtains after Mrs. Petrov had retired to her room over the garage, Ryan and Celeste sat on the back porch in the same 2 folding chairs where a year earlier they had taken each other's hand in the dark. She rested her head against his shoulder. "Ryan." "Yes." "I want you to know something." "Yes. I still have those $18, the ones you gave me. I have them in a frame on the wall of my office where I can see them every morning when I sit down at my desk. I have not told anyone what they are. They look like nothing, but I know what they are, and every morning when I look at them, I remember." He was quiet for a long moment. "What do you remember, Celeste?" She lifted her head and looked at him in the porch light. "I remember that one cold morning in February. A stranger sat down on a bench beside me and gave me everything he had and asked for nothing in return. And in doing so, he gave me back my life. He gave me back my faith. He gave me back the world, Ryan. He gave me back the world." She paused. "I am not going to forget that, Ryan Hale. Not ever. Not for as long as I live." He looked at her for a long time. Then he wrapped his arm around her and pulled her against his chest, and he kissed the top of her head, and they sat like that on the porch in the dark for a long, long time, while the cicadas sang in the trees, and the porch light glowed gentle and golden over a small house that against every odd in the world had become a home. Ryan Hale had given a stranger his last $18 on the coldest morning of his life, and the world had given him back everything he had ever lost and more than he had ever dared to dream of. That is the truth of this story. Kindness, even when it costs you everything you have, is never wasted. It travels farther than you will ever know. It returns in ways you cannot imagine. And one day, when you have forgotten you ever gave it, it comes back to you, and it knocks on your door at 8:14 in the morning, and it changes your life forever.